Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
Great. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you for today's event. So yeah, we're going to do a series of events actually. Us UIB. So I'm Henry. I'm part of UIB Minds. You might have heard of us through the social media post we did with the System Dynamics Society, represented today by Fernando. So we're doing this in partnership. We're doing a seminar series, which is so the first event is today. We have the honor and pleasure to have Birgit Kopainsky, which I'll say a few more words later on. And she'll give us a talk about how food and system dynamics gave her a career. So just to start with, a few words with Minds. We could switch slide, Fernando. About who we are. So Minds is a system dynamics student-led organization. So we're working closely with the system dynamics group at the University of Bergen in Norway. So we aim to provide sort of mentoring to junior system dynamicists around different topics, like today's sort of a seminar like today, or just throughout the courses, we try to help them out with the courses. So we share our knowledge through special topic seminars, or we expand the learning activities that is done through the master program that we have in Bergen to other types of things. And we also manage the alumni network of the program and things of that nature. So as I said, we work closely with the System Dynamics group. So you could switch to the next slide, Fernando. System Dynamics Group is basically an autonomous research group specialized in system dynamics modeling here in Bergen. So as you see, beautiful pictures of Bergen, quite a landscape we have here. And we offer, as I said, a 2-year program. So for those who are interested, we suggest sort of copying the QR code here, and I'll send a link as well in the chat note if you want more information about what was done in Bergen and things of that nature. So we hope to talk to you more and more, and I'll give the floor to Fernando, who will talk about the System Dynamics Society.
Thanks, Henry. Before I say anything about the conference or whatsoever, I just want to thank you guys from the Minds group here at the University of Bergen to agreeing with this partnership and promoting this as a seminar series and making it part of the System Dynamics Society, and also thanking Birgit for accepting this a little bit under pressure to do this open to all the System Dynamics Society community. And I just want to say that this webinar is probably very interesting. I always love hearing Birgit speaking. And I thought to myself that I want to do a webinar in the future is how Birgit Kopainsky and System Dynamics gave me a career. And many of us here in the group can basically do this webinar because Birgit has touched us in so many ways. So this is just want to invite you guys for the conference this year. If you guys don't know, it's in Chicago from 23rd of July to 27th of July. So 5 days we're going to be there in Chicago, and you can also join the conference online if you're not making your way to the US. And if you plan to learn more about system dynamics and develop your system dynamics modeling skills, we have the summer school with the intro and the intermediate tracks, and you can register for it very soon, and you can have more information at our website. As usual in the seminar series, we collect questions throughout the presentations, and today is no different. So I'm gonna put a link here in the chat where you can send your questions. I have just a quick question to make you guys familiar with Poe Everywhere. So there's a link here in the chat, or you can scan this QR code here in the image, or you can just go to your browser and type this address here, polev.com/sts-poles877, and just let us know where you're joining us from. I know there's plenty of people joining us from Bergen, but I want to see where else we are joining us from. So I see some people from London, the Netherlands, Belgium. I see also people putting in the chat a few things. From Vanessa, you're from London. I see Lagos, Brazil, New York, Germany. A lot of people from the Netherlands, it seems like. In Germany, Korea, that's nice. South Korea, Copenhagen. Well, I see you guys, you know, seminar series always give us this sense of worldwide community of the society, and today is really no different. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hand over to Henry again, but just alerting that the questions will be collected throughout Birgit's presentation, and you can send to exactly the same link that you're sending right now to this question.
Thanks, Fernando. This is beautiful to see how many people from all over the world are joining us today. It's quite a pleasure, I have to say. I see 71 have already joined and more joining as we go. Quite wonderful. So I'll just give a few words about the honorable guest that we have. Sort of as a system dynamicist from Bergen. Birgit is a bit of a mother to us all. She's responsible for the program. She's, besides a wonderful human being, she's a system thinker and modeler that focuses on ecological system and transformation processes around climate change, agriculture, food security, and things of that nature. She's worked in Europe and in sub-Saharan Africa with stakeholders as group model building activities develop and things of that nature. So she doesn't really need an introduction that much, but now that you have a face here and a name to remember if you haven't known her yet, and with no further ado, we'll give the floor to Birgit, if she is there. I can't see her on the video. There she is.
Yep.
Hello, Birgit. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Henry. I've said that before. You owe me big time. So let's do the thing. Oh, I wanted to hide them first. No, sorry. I've only done this for 3 years, so will take a while. I want to get, where are we? Share this so that the people in the room don't have, okay, sorry, people in the room, you have to see this, or otherwise it will take forever. So I'm going to address the room first, because this was the intended audience of this chat. So thanks for coming. Thanks, Henry and Edwin, for organizing this. I agreed to this talk a while ago when I was still under the impression that this was going to be an intimate conversation among people that I've known for a while and who wanted to learn more about how we can forge a career in system dynamics, what my life path looked like. And I was going to spill it all. I was going to essentially turn this into a therapy session where I expose all my vulnerabilities. And I'm still doing this. So the 80 people online. Thanks for joining. It's I'm going to look at the chat later. I'm sure there are lots of people that I know, and it's great to have you guys with us in Bergen. That's always been my dream. We're system dynamics, whether we are in Bergen or somewhere else. Let's do this together. Those of you who were at the PhD colloquium in Albuquerque, please go and do something else, because this is very much the recycling of the talk that I gave at the PhD colloquium in Albuquerque. So there is nothing major that I'm going to add to the mental and emotional strip down. And for those who were not in Albuquerque, either online or in person, this is the story of me. And I thought about doing two things today. Because I mean, here in Bergen and at the System Dynamics conferences, we always talk about how can we make a contribution? How can system dynamics help solve some of the societal challenges out there? So I'm not going to give a talk about how we can do that. I'm going to report on some of the work that I have done. I'm going to report proudly on some of the work that I think has had an impact. And I'll use that work to reflect on my pathway, to reflect on how I made it work. This is not a recipe, and I very much recommend not following my example. You'll see it in slide whatever 78 or something. That is only black. That's sometimes what my life feels like. So this is not a recipe. It's my story. How can we use system dynamics to contribute to the challenges that the world is facing, and what does it take to get there? I'll start with giving examples of two major projects that took a while to get there, but that also showed some impact, and then I'll use them to reflect on the second bullet point. And of course, I'm already running behind time. So those of you who know me, I am assuming that's a lot of people, and none of you has been able to avoid hearing me talk about food. Food can fix it is my career content and my life passion. My background is in geography and agricultural economics. I only came to system dynamics later. So I've always been passionate about food systems and their challenges and issues at large. And I'm going to start with some of these, with illustrating or highlighting some of these challenges so that we can start understanding how system dynamics can make a contribution there. Some of the major food system challenges that we observe are undernutrition. And here what we see is a fairly recent map that shows the global situation of hunger as a snapshot. It's a very unsystem dynamics picture. There's no time series. It's a one point in time situation, and we see the global distribution of hunger, with green areas being okay-ish, and the redder we get, the more problems these countries are facing. The gray countries are not doing exceptionally well. They're just not represented in the data set. I want to highlight the, I should do that here. I want to highlight the entire continent of Africa that doesn't have a lot of green on the map, but has all different shades of red. Now I'm going to compare this snapshot picture of today's situation in terms of hunger. So in terms of the ability to feed the population that we have, with the expectations with regard to population growth, to population development. And what we see here is the geographical distribution of expected population growth, with an overall increase in population growth of between 3 and 4 billion people between 2013 and 2100, and the distribution of this overall growth across continents. And I want to highlight once again the continent of Africa, that doesn't only exhibit today challenges with feeding the population that is already there, but that also has the highest expected population growth, with up to a doubling of the population in these countries, in most of the countries. And let's add a third thing to the mix. Let's add climate change and expectations about the development of crop yields to the picture, and we see the same continent going deep red. Red representing expectations of severe decreases in crop yields. So this starts being the perfect storm. We have problems already today to feed the population. We're expecting more people that need feeding, and we're expecting a decline in the productive base. We could also represent it in the form of the planetary boundaries, but the story is essentially the same. We're underachieving food security goals, and there are issues when it comes to environmental goals. So this climate change that makes it more difficult to feed a growing population is happening, and it is partly or to a large extent happening because of agriculture. What we see here, and now we're moving towards time series, huh? What we see here is overall emissions and contributions of the different economic sectors. And I want to highlight the green areas, which represent agriculture, land use, blah, 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 etc. So agriculture is one of the, is an important part of the problem. It's contributing to its own problem. We start seeing feedback loops here, right? But agriculture is potentially an important part of the solution. Hence, the food can fix it. There are enormous potentials in there are enormous mitigation potentials within the agriculture sector. So we can look at this sector from two sides. It's a driver of the problem, but it's also a driver of solutions. And when we start looking into how food systems are usually conceptualized, how we address these issues of achieving food security outcomes through food system activities, through the activities of production, processing, transporting, and consumption, we start seeing feedback loops, right? We start seeing interactions between food system activities and food system outcomes, but also with the larger drivers that determine how activities can be implemented, or what is possible and what is not possible. And in this domain, I don't want to call it a system, everybody comes with their extremely well-intentioned policies. Everybody comes and says, I'm concerned, I want to do something. I want to do something, I'm going to offer a silver bullet solution in the area of climate change. Or I want to offer a silver bullet solution in terms of domestic market policies, in terms of human health, in terms of poverty elimination. Everybody comes in with their silver bullet solution. The slides that I showed in the beginning are testimony to the fact that it's probably not that simple. None of these silver bullet solutions has worked so far. Which brings me to my career objective. How can system dynamics tools and techniques support transformation processes in food systems and other social ecological systems? How can we use the tools and the techniques that our method gives us to tackle problems like this, to address these issues? So how do we do that? I'm going to go through two examples as mentioned. My first example is investigates the question of how can we use the tools and techniques that system dynamics offers to us in contexts that don't lend themselves too well to computer simulation. So you see there is a big question mark between a simulation interface and local resource users on the ground that probably haven't gone through the system dynamics program at the University of Bergen. So we looked into this question of how we can adapt the modeling process, the participatory modeling process, to these less conventional contexts, to start with in Zambia and then moved into other countries. Zambia, just one time series. Zambia suffers from the same affliction as much of the rest of the continent. We see a widening gap between between food demand, requirements of food, and food production. And in this specific country, the gap between what is required and what a person, what is available from within the country has not been met for a couple of decades. So it's not something that is due to one particularly bad year. It's something recurrent and persistent. Agriculture in this country is very, very largely small scale. I don't have the exact figures in my mind, but it's 95% of the maize production, which makes for half of the caloric intake, is produced on less than 2 hectares of land there is not a lot of commercial agriculture. These are the resource users. These are the people who make decisions on how to grow crops and on how to feed the population. So what we did was we went there, and instead of bringing a computer, we brought a fake computer in the form of a whiteboard. We brought fake variables in the form of labels, in the form of pictures, and in the form of objects to provide different experiences of what these variables represented. And we just started by having a discussion of issues that these communities are facing when it comes to livelihoods and food security. So we started placing different what we call variables on the whiteboard. And by talking so much about these concepts and illustrating them with pictures and with objects, the conversation moved quite naturally to saying, well, but isn't that connected? Isn't what we produce going to affect how much money we can make because we can sell some of it? Isn't what we produce going to affect whether we have enough food throughout the year or not? So this provided a very natural stepping stone to talk about linkages, causal links between variables, which we mapped out here. And we continued mapping. I mean, it's probably not the most beautiful causal loop diagram that you've ever seen, because the loops go like not very loopy, but they still describe feedback loops. They still describe mainly reinforcing loops. And again, we faked computer simulation by using water glasses to illustrate the kinds of processes that these variables and interconnections between variables give rise to. By saying, well, if I have a little cash available, so pouring some water into the cash glass, then we can buy more inputs. If we can buy more inputs, we can cultivate more land. If we can cultivate more land, we can produce more food. So the water in the food glass increases. If we can produce more food, we have more food available. We can consume more food. We can also sell more food. And then we end up with having even more water in the glass, which of course gets people very excited, saying, yes, that's exactly what I want. I want my water glass, I want my cash glass to overflow. I want it to go. But of course, usually, so this is a very intuitive way of explaining what a reinforcing feedback loop is. It's making sure that the process makes the glasses overflow. What's also easy to show is that, well, usually process works the other way around, right? You keep losing water here and there, and then you have less and even less and even less and even less. So a reinforcing feedback loop works in both directions. So the next step then was to start brainstorming about what are some of the factors that determine that we keep losing water from these glasses rather than keep gaining water into these glasses. And of course you can't read them, but some of these purple elements describe stuff that makes water go away from the loop rather than feeding the loop into a desired direction. My favorite stuff is, selfish and expensive things that keep draining the water glass. That could be jewelry, clothes, or girlfriends, alcohol, everything. And of course, it's also possible to say, well, but we can also think of interventions. We can also think of solutions. What can we do to fill these water glasses? So these are the yellow labels here. And just one example is this very label here that of course you can't read. It's called piecework. It's a Zambia term for hired labor work. So it's when you as a farmer go and weed your neighbor's field to make some money. So then, you know, we could use these proposals for alleviating the problem to simulate their impact, their direct but also their indirect impact. And piecework was a wonderful example of a fix that fails, of a short-term increase that leads to a long-term decrease of the cash class. And the story was something like, well, if I go and weed my neighbor's field, I earn some money. That increases the water in my cash class. That's great. But what it also does is it prevents me from weeding my own field. I weed it too late. So then I lose land that produces food at the end of the season. So in the short run, I have more cash. In the long run, I have less land available that ends up producing less food. That allows me to sell less food that I don't need and that I can bring to the market. So it's a better before worse thing, and that created a lot of aha moments. So that was amazing. That was amazing. There was a fairly brief workshop, great conversations, great interactions. And we went back 10 days later to talk to the participants because we were interested, of course, with researchers we are, about what they remembered, how they were thinking about things, how they were thinking differently about things. But that was 10 days. So my lovely country partner Progress went back 1 year later and interviewed the same people who participated in these workshops, and they drew this for him. Now, I don't expect you to read every word on this, but doesn't it look very similar to the diagram that we had drawn a year previously in a 3-hour workshop? That made me think, like, wow, something happened here. We talked a little more and also learned about some of the actions that farmers had undertaken in this year. I'm not attributing all of them to the workshop. That's certainly not legitimate, but it was impressive to see that out of this small exercise, we heard at least some actions that were related to the thinking that we were practicing there, like the awareness of budgeting food so that it lasts throughout the year, of budgeting cash. Some farmers were teaching fellow farmers. Other farmers, I have to be honest, said, hey, we learned something here. We will not tell anybody about this. So the world is not just beautiful. Some had started a business with livestock, others, some other forms of small businesses like investing in used clothes and trading used clothes to fill their water cups. So that's another reason for me to think, wow, that was pretty cool. Until this one woman said, hey, you know, I realized how extremely important it is to fill the water glasses. So I'm considering cutting wood to sell as charcoal, because that will fill my water glasses, right? So I'm going to cut down the bushes and the trees, because you said cash is important. Maybe not the most intended consequence. So, you know, maybe think a little about extending the system boundary, not just including food, but maybe also other resources, and maybe refine the process. So that was back, I can't even remember. It was back a couple of years ago. We've experimented with these tools and with these processes in a number of countries. We saw similar results, for example, in Cambodia, where other activities had been implemented, became equally happy about some of the promising results, but thought, well, maybe we should be a little more systematic about this. Is it something that we can attribute to these activities, or is it something that happens anyway? So I was part of and you see what part I was, somewhere in the middle. So I was part of another project that also used participatory modeling in Cambodia. We ran similar types of workshops there, but we did it in a much more systematic way to learn about whether and how participatory modeling updates expectations. And I'm going to go a little deeper. I'm going to say a little more about expectations in a minute. So this is a completely different geographical context, where again we looked into expectations because there is some literature that says that expectations or changes in expectations are fairly robust predictors of behavior change. So not intentions, but expectations, because we know that we all want to protect the environment a lot more, but we never do. So that's an intention. Expectations are somewhat different. It's like, what do I expect I do, or what do I expect to happen? And this, apparently, there is literature that shows that this is a more robust predictor of behavior change. So we did the same thing. We ran these workshops, but we did a pre-test and a post-test to be a little more systematic about this. And what we did was we asked workshop participants about their expectations regarding different things, including future events that they couldn't control, but also future events that they could control, like crop decisions and yield, or investment in fish ponds and aquaculture, irrigation and small dams, commune investment planning, etc. And we asked them a series of questions. They always had to say how likely they thought that this specific thing was going to happen. And what we found was for some of these events, there was a significant difference pre and post. For some there wasn't, for some there was. So for example, there was an expectation about increasing the income from agriculture or from fishing. And also there was some convergence in expectations. So there were higher expectations that participants would engage in community planning activities, informal and informal collaborations that would all lead to more income generating activities in agriculture and fisheries. So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, also here we have a caveat. Participants also judged it much less likely that they would participate in the commune investment planning process again. So this is a nationally enforced thing that has to happen. And while participants were happy to engage in other activities, they were like, nah, not the thing that I have to do. So I'll leave it up to you to judge whether that's a desirable or undesirable outcome. So that's my example one. Using system dynamics as we know it in terms of identifying variables and relationships between variables, thinking about loops and the behavior that loops generate, using that understanding about behavior to identify and evaluate policies in these community contexts. I'm going to touch on a second example, which is going to take much less time, which is about policy. So now this was community behavior change. Now I'm jumping to my own home country, to Switzerland, to talk about an application more on the policy level. And that application is in a project that was actually called the same thing as the paper or as one of the papers that resulted from it. Project investigated the issue or the question of whether we can increase sustainability and health of diets at the same time, or whether there is a trade-off between these two ambitions. The reason why we thought this was a fairly important question to ask, again, is that nutrition is the biggest emitter. The consumption of food by the Swiss population is the main source of environmental impact. Transportation is lower, housing is lower, energy is lower. It's food that is responsible for a lot of the environmental, for most of the environmental impact. And health, I mean, so are the current diets in Switzerland sustainable? No. Are they healthy? Yeah. So this is the food pyramid, and this is the actual consumption. So it's a little distorted, the actual pyramid. It's a broken pyramid with a fairly heavy top, where alcohol and sugar and stuff is sugar and unhealthy fats are located. And the second lower level with the fruits and vegetables, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether that's a desirable or undesirable part of the pyramid. So one of the objectives of this larger project that I was involved in was to test the consequences of healthier and more plant-based diets, and to explore options to increase the environmental sustainability of food systems. And again, we wanted to see whether sustainability and health would move in the same direction or in opposite directions and create some trade-offs. This was part of, actually, so it was a fairly long research project with a lot of partners. The system dynamics modeling part was not the only thing that the project did. It was this small bit somewhere in the center. But so we built this system dynamics model that essentially looked at food production, how animal production and plant production are related to each other through different processes, how their feedback loops within animal production or plant production, and what some of the main inputs and outputs are of animal production and of plant production. I didn't build that model on my own. I built that model based on a lot of things, based on literature, based on data, based on quite a bit of stakeholder workshops, and also based on exchanges with other modelers who were looking at similar issues and who we were in constant exchange with regarding data, assumptions, blah, blah, blah. And so what I'm going to show is I'm going to show some simulation runs that look into how some of the sustainability outcomes and health outcomes develop over time in a baseline scenario that runs between 2020 and 2050, and how these same outcomes develop under a health-oriented scenario that's called the Swiss food pyramid, and how they develop, but I'm not going to go into detail into the sustainability-related scenario that we labeled feed no food. Animals only get to eat stuff that humans cannot eat. They don't get our bread, our prospective bread. So I'm going to focus on this one here. The scenario, the input to the scenario was consumption patterns that represent the Swiss food pyramid. And what we see here are, you actually only need to look at the red bars. The red bars represent the difference between the per capita consumption in the baseline scenario, so under today's situation, and the recommendations of the Swiss Society for Nutrition in red. So we see, for example, that the Swiss Food Pyramid recommends you to eat twice as much vegetables as are currently eaten. It also recommends you to, well, the grapes are not really fruits. They're, at least in Switzerland, I don't know about other countries, they're consumed in the form of wine. And also sugar crops are very low in the recommendations. That all makes sense. What I want to point out is here on the animal product side, the recommendations point towards a reduction of bovine meat consumption of about roughly 50%, pork a tad more, poultry also 50%. And of course, you know, this being Switzerland, I mean, we love our cows, but also there are some pastures. We can still drink quite a bit of milk. Yeah.
What's bovine?
Bovine is cattle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's the it's a cow's family relatives.
Yeah.
Baby cows called wheels, male cows called oops. Yes, bulls, yes, etc. So it's all the relatives to the cows.
Okay.
Yeah. So some 80% milk consumption as compared to today's level, only 50% of bovine meat. So then I hit the run button on the simulation model, and what do we see here? We see on the left-hand side bovine meat production. Baseline is blue, and SFP, the red one, Swiss Food Pyramid, is red. Wait, what? The recommendations were go down to 50% of today's bovine meat consumption. And we produce almost the same amount of bovine meat. First reaction of everybody was, the model sucks. It's wrong. And then, good grief, did I check the model. I ended up with this conclusion. I love system dynamics. Why do I love system dynamics? There are a number of reasons. In this context, it's because of the ability to conserve mass, to conserve matter. And if we look into the biology of cows, and here I got you. Now I can talk to you about the biology of cows. I got you trapped in here, either in person or on Zoom. So the biology of cows says that a cow in Switzerland lives about 5 years. But in order to produce the amount of milk that it has to produce to be considered economically viable, it needs to carry one calf each and every year. So do we need one calf each and every year to replace a cow that is productive over 5 years? No, right? So those calves that we don't need to keep this aging chain here in dynamic equilibrium, they move into the meat production line. And even if we kill them as soon as we can, we still have some meat, and we need to respect some of the legal minimum lifetimes of these animals. So as long as we consume milk, there is going to be some meat production. Yeah, I think that slide said, and there were lots of more things that we did, but that's not important for my point here. I was super happy about this one result, because it eventually led to the adaptation of the guidelines by the Swiss Society of Nutrition that saw that there is a disbalance between recommendations regarding milk and recommendations regarding bovine meat. And I'm making the point about bovine meat because the other meat doesn't have this biology. So I thought that was also pretty cool. So what have we got so far? I've talked about two proud moments. There was something that had impact on behavior change, and there was some work that had impact on policy. Now the question, of course, is how on earth did that happen? I sure as hell didn't plan it like that. That's where we move to the second part of the presentation, and don't worry, it's not as long as the first part. Birgit's story, I can't talk about music that long. So how do we make a difference? This is, and a good system analysis, right? So here's a timeline. Stuff happening over time. This story we started back in 2000. Never mind what happened before. And we're moving towards today. In the year 2000, I started my PhD in agricultural economics. System dynamics wasn't even in the picture then. 2 years later, I started my PhD again. And that sounds very funny. It was absolutely not funny. That was, these were two very, very miserable years, and I was ready to quit. I entered the field of system dynamics because my agricultural economics professor was like, well, why don't you try systems approaches? What he didn't say was, you're clearly not cut out for the real ag econ stuff. So he was like, I've heard about these systems approaches, why don't you look into these? And I did. So eventually I even finished my PhD. And big shout out to the System Dynamics Society. You guys made this happen by organizing the conferences, by providing networking opportunities such as the PhD colloquium, and by being such a wonderful community. I found the support that I needed to get over the finish line and feel supported. So whatever I do, Fernando, is I'm giving back, nothing else. You got me there from a place of deep depression to at least I have a PhD. At some point you're like, so then yeah, I have this, and then I think the best part of my career started, and I want to summarize it as I was a freelance researcher for a decade or so. A freelance researcher because I found my own projects. I found the projects that I wanted to work on, and it was awesome. And at some point I became a professor. That's also great, but freelance researcher is really the career dream. Over time, I've never been just a researcher. There were times where I was 95% consultant and a little bit of a researcher on the side. This has somehow faded out mostly because there's something about this being a professor that that fills your days. So what did I do during all these stages? During my PhD, I worked on issues of rural employment and population dynamics. I used system dynamics, level of enthusiasm for the methodology, awesome. Quality of the model, horrendous. Not quite a balance. It wouldn't fly anymore today, but number of publications resulting from the PhD, +-1. I'm saying +-1 because it really wasn't the hardcore scientific journal paper that came out. It was an applied thing. When I moved from my PhD to being more of a consultant and also freelance researcher in this domain, I would say, roughly I did some 20 consulting projects, use of SD, ±0. I worked a lot on rural development and agricultural development questions. People were very fascinated by my SD background, but please know that they please didn't want SD. They wanted something now. And I gave it to them. You know, you got to pay your bills. Over time, I started combining. I was kind of done building models and realizing that the data is always missing and policymakers never listen. So I started looking into what does it take for people to understand what we're doing and for mental model change to happen, so for learning to happen. It was always in the same domains. It was always rural ag development stuff. And I moved more and more into what I call food plus plus plus. Stuff that has to do with food security, climate change, sustainability and resilience, health, sustainable development goals, water, food, energy nexus, stuff like that. And then, after doing a lot of this for a lot of years with not a lot of publications, with some system dynamics here and there, mostly unpaid for, then I started being able to work on the bigger interdisciplinary projects and collaborations. That got me the funding for the Zambia project that started the work on the participatory modeling. That got me into the bigger, into the interdisciplinary projects that allowed a project such as the Sustainable and Healthy Diets project to emerge. That allowed me to hire a lot of you here and online. And my point here is, it took its freaking sweet time. Did I have a lot of impact while doing my PhD or as a recent graduate? No. It's only the Erling Moxnes who have a huge policy impact upon graduation. For the rest of us, it takes time. It really takes time. So what I learned from all of this was, it will move at snail speed, much more slowly than you wanted to move. And I found it very useful to not jump from one application domain to the other, because people started respecting me as an expert in the field. They came and said, you know about this. Also, you do system dynamics. But I was talking about things and being taken seriously by what I said. Seriously because I knew about the stuff and not because I was advocating for a method. And that's my third bullet point so far. Please don't insist on system dynamics. It's a tool. It helps solve problems, but people are really interested in the solutions. And the tool that you use to get there, that's kind of sort of secondary. Not for us, but for them. So that's my intermediate. No, not that. That's my intermediate conclusions. It takes time. Don't jump from one domain to the next, and don't insist on system dynamics. People start taking you seriously. And then this happened. There was this beautiful period in my life. All unicorns and flowers, etc. to very cute kids. This decade here that I'm representing with this picture, in my memory, is more like this. I entered a big, fat, black tunnel. And all I could think of was coffee, and that I was very, very, very close to complete and total collapse. So, they're super cute, yes. But we're talking about impact here, right? It's possible, yes. Good grief, it bloody hurts. So it's, this myth about, we juggle this all, it's magical and we can make it happen. It's really more like this, that thing. And I don't want to sugarcoat this. We can have an impact. It is possible, but it bloody hurts. And if we want to have an impact, it doesn't have to be with children. That's not about them. If we want to have an impact, we got to put in the work. And sometimes it just hurts. So that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Birgit. That was quite wonderful to hear all this. Sorry?
Never mind me.
Okay. I'll be sort of managing a bit the questions that came up online. Edwin, maybe you want to start up the conversation with the people that are in person. Do they have a bunch of questions, or shall we start with people online?
In person.
Are there any questions?
Anna,
I've never heard of the term freelance researcher before.
that's my own definition.
Yeah, but that sounds a bit stressful to be like not knowing what you do next. How did you find that?
Well, at some point I did become a professor. So I loved it. I loved it because I was crafting the life that I wanted to live. I was investigating the questions that I wanted to investigate. But yes, it was super stressful because while you're doing one thing, you already need to think about the next. And that thing, you know, about the two cute angel-like creatures there only increases the stress when you're not just responsible for yourself, but for more. So yes, I loved it for 10 years. I loved it, and I was very resistant to finding a permanent job with contained structures and bosses that tell me what to do, or universities that have weird rules. And 10 years later, I was ready. Yeah, but it's the best period. There's no such thing as free lunch, and it worked for me. You know, that's why I say, please don't do what I did. It worked for me at that time.
Never again.
Are there any more questions?
What have you learned most about your research and when you went to it?
So the question is what I learned, what my main insights were about from my research and from going to Africa. Oh, I don't know, you know, I find, you know, when you work in developing contexts, I find it very, you know, and you're as obviously white as I am, I find this very tricky to navigate. And, you know, the more I learned about the realities on the ground, the more questions I had and the more critical I became. But what I can still wholeheartedly kind of defend and believe in is working with people and think through issues, not telling them what to do, but, you know, thinking together. And I want to believe that this has an impact and that this is part of the solution.
I saw 3 strong arms.
Yeah, do the math, right? plus, minus.
In your experience, was the people that you worked with in the field, how did they react to using system dynamics when they never used this before? Like, do you feel like, because sometimes I think people think that system dynamics is maybe too simplistic to really contain all the world that they're working in, yeah. So I wonder, like, do you feel like they really embrace the method, or do you sometimes have difficulties that they felt like we're definitely have a challenge here?
Yeah. And so, you know, these community contexts I mean, these are very specific contexts. I share your impression about, sometimes people want more complex or comprehensive models to see everything reflected. In these specific contexts, I've never talked about system dynamics, but people are born systems thinkers. We unteach them to think systemically. There is no magic behind saying, oh, if I do this, that happens. And there are some vicious processes at hand, and we can turn them into, water cups flowing over situations. I found it much more, I was scared senseless of these contexts. And it's still been the most rewarding thing so far that I do. I grab every opportunity to go back.
It's interesting. Could we maybe have one question from the online people? So we go back a bit back and forth.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
there's a bunch of questions online, and they might have to leave, so I don't want to make it too bad. So maybe I'll share my screen. I don't know if you can see it. Oh no, okay, perfect. Fernando could do it. No, Fernando,
You
you
want
can
to
do it.
share yours? I can share mine if you want.
Go ahead, share yours. It'll be easier that way.
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
Let me just go ahead and present.
Wonderful.
Do you want to start for the most popular ones here?
Yeah, I think that one was there from for quite a while, so we can start with that one.
Yeah.
So the basic question, I think, to summarize it, is sort of the dilemma or the nexus between food and energy crisis, and how those are intertwined. So what are your thoughts on it, related also to renewable energies and the potential of biomass use from agriculture?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'm going to give a systems thinker's answer. I think to resolve the competition between food or crops for consumption by humans and crops for energy production cannot be solved without changing the rules of the system. And that, if we continue growing, how can we continue growing forever? How can we continue growing energy demand? How can we continue growing food demand and think that magically with an eroding product resource base, we're going to solve the problem one way or the other? So my answer is we need to expand the system boundary and redesign the rules of the system so that the system isn't based on a growth paradigm anymore. I know that this is the implementation of this answer is a little trickier than saying, let's go for technology, but that's my take.
Sounds like a very good answer to me. Maybe the next one in that list. Yeah, what's your advice on making an impact with making more money? Yeah, so we did sort of briefly talk about money, and so that could be. What's your advice on that?
So you're asking the wrong person. You're asking the wrong person. All my career choices have led to me making less money. But with the education that I have, I could make much more money. I follow my passion. This is my generic recommendation. Please follow your passion, whatever you do. It makes you much happier. But I mean, money is important, but not necessarily more money. So say a minimum threshold, and then follow your passion.
I like that. I like that too. And maybe a third one.
Please, I'm depressed. My dream research project is how do we keep our master program alive after the stupid Norwegian government's decision to introduce tuition fees. But I'm sorry, that's all I can think of at the moment. I would love to have the vision to give you my dream research project. I want to be able to think about it again, but let's not talk about our recruitment crisis at the moment.
Next one up. So I think
When
this timeline is the timeline you showed earlier with your whole career. That's what they're mentioning here.
Yeah, on this timeline, when do you think you've achieved your financial security stability by working with SD projects? I want to say between 5 years post PhD and never, because again, I don't want to insist on system dynamics. It's what I can do best, but much as we love it, sometimes it's also not the most suitable approach. And I'm kind of married to food plus. So some questions deserve other methodologies. And I'm happy to contribute to that too.
This is a compliment.
This one is a good one to answer.
I'm sorry. Thanks for showing the question, but I'm not going to even try.
I think there's another one here. Do you want to read that, Avery?
Sure. You talked about how to use system dynamics for the problems that are not easy to model and simulate. That's where you started for Zambia. So how should we deal with this issue? That is, when it's hard to see the problem in terms of system dynamics model, how to perceive it and how to deal with that difficulty. Quite a wide question.
I'm not sure. I'm going to give you my understanding of the question, which to me sounds, well, what do you do if system dynamics is not the appropriate methodology? Do you then tweak it into a system dynamics problem, or do you use another method? I guess I would say that depends on the project context. In our master program, please tweak it into a system dynamics problem. If your client wants system dynamics, then maybe you need to continue talking about what the actual problem is. And that's not only the most difficult step in the educational context, that's the most difficult step ever. Clients usually never know what they want. They just want something and you to fix it. So if it's going to be a system dynamics project, then you have to negotiate with the client what makes for a good dynamic problem statement. If the client is married to that problem, then you need to divorce from system dynamics. One of you has to divorce, either the client from the problem or you from the methodology. Konstantin has a question here in the room.
Let's go with that. Great idea.
I was wondering what kind of skills do you find most useful when working with system dynamics?
Talking to people. But that's my way of doing system dynamics. So I'm interested in people.
I was afraid you could answer that.
Sorry, but you don't have to do participatory research. You don't. There are more analytical ways of doing system dynamics. You don't have to work with farmers in Africa. So it depends on the project, depends on the context. Although I would say, talking to people is a useful skill, but you don't have to go all the way there and use water glasses and lose the whiteboard on the truck because the road is too bumpy. It's not funny, it's happened. It happened.
Any more questions in the room?
Do we have more questions in the room? Doesn't look like it at the moment, so we can go back.
If you look at the screen, you have more questions coming up. So maybe the first one. So you've been talking about how to not insist too much on system dynamics in projects. Could you further develop on that fact, so to speak?
I don't know how to further develop on that. If a problem is not dynamic, why? If there is no feedback loop, then if it's about doing building an inventory, a CO2, a greenhouse gas emission inventory, then let's not use system dynamics. If it's about taking stock of food at different places without investigating what makes these stocks grow and decline, then I don't, then why? Then we can't add value, and if we can't add value, people don't like us. I want people to like us. I want people to see that we're doing something useful.
That's a nice way of putting it. I like that. I thought that behind, yeah, the first one there could be an interesting one. It's quite a burning topic, let's say. So maybe just general thought about system dynamics and its relationship maybe to AI and machine learning around policy making projects.
I think it's a huge opportunity for us. I mean, these developments are happening, and they're happening whether we like them or not. I am not the person to contribute to this discussion, but there are lots of incredibly awesome system dynamicists who are able to contribute to this discussion. And I think, our way of thinking in terms of structure can contribute to the ongoing work in artificial intelligence and machine learning, because we can help with explanations, not just with pattern matching, but with explanations. So I want to believe that we have something useful to offer.
I like to believe that too, Birgit.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Maybe this one is a pretty good one. Yeah, you observed on antagonism between healthy nutrition and sustainable agriculture. How about the argument that such an antagonism does not exist? On the contrary, healthy food and sustainable agriculture are complementary and mutually reinforcing.
I would say generally, absolutely.
Quick answer. That's.
There are some nuances, and it always depends. Well, no. How long do I have for this answer?
As much as you want.
No, I mean, generally, absolutely. But, the devil is always in the detail. And so if we take let's take a country such as Switzerland. It's a country that has a lot of grassland, of pasture land that cannot be used for crop production. So there is always going to be, if we keep this grassland open, if we don't give it up to deforestation, there is always a potential to produce animal products. But these animal products, and I can bring in cows again, have to be ruminants. So animals that eat grass, that can live from eating grass. That excludes poultry, for example. So in a country like Switzerland, and that the same would be true here in Norway, we have a potential to produce more or less sustainably animal products from ruminants. If you listen to health people, they're like, please don't eat red meat. If you eat meat, please eat white meat. White meat comes from poultry. Poultry eats my food. Poultry eats the food that could be my bread. So in the big picture, I completely agree that sustainable agriculture and healthy food are extremely complementary. But in the detail, there is a trade-off between sustainability and health in some areas.
Very interesting, very interesting. Summarizes the question too. 2 more left. Can you talk about why some models leave out disposal? And when talking about a food system and its complexity, wouldn't that make it incomplete? Quite a technical one, but I guess that can be answered.
Disposal of what? Disposal of food?
I assume yes.
Could you talk about why some models leave out disposal when talking about a food system and its complexity? I would like to agree that it makes it incomplete, but I would also like to advocate for modeling a problem and not a system. So yes, I did start with talking about food system challenges, but I do believe in the value of investigating problems and not systems. So I don't know whether I can give a very generic answer of saying, yes, it's wrong. Every model needs to have food disposal if it looks into food systems. But if we talk about food waste here, oh, please, yes. That's halfway to the solution. Reducing food waste. If we manage to reduce food waste, we can forget about a lot of the other challenges, because then we have 40% more to eat on average. We don't need to produce 40% more. It's there. It's in the garbage bag.
That's a good answer. Last but not least. Is it possible that speakers share the link to the papers used in the presentation? Because you mentioned quite a bit.
I can also share the presentation without the picture of my children.
That can work out. We'll just take out that slide. Great.
No, I'll pick it up.
Is there more question in the audience, in the auditorium?
No.
No?
I'm gonna say no.
I got a quick one if I can. But my question is kind of vague but generic. If you had to sort of pitch in a 2 minutes. Oh no! Oh no!
Don't give me the assignment that I did.
No, but let's say if you had to pitch system dynamics to, well, not system dynamics. If you had to pitch sort of your approach or your work, with or without mentioning system dynamics, how would you do this?
Can I leave? I think I have an important call. How can I pitch my work? I want to understand how we can feed a growing population without eroding the natural resource base more.
That's it. Pretty good. That's a lot shorter than 2 minutes, but that's okay. Summarizes it all.
I can only give either extremely short answers or babble for forever, but nothing in between.
Okay. Well, if there's no questions out there and no question on our side, Birgit, I would like to say thank you so very much for your time. And thank you also to all the people that came in live. Thank you for all the people that came online. It was a pleasure to have this event, and we're looking forward for the upcoming events. Stay tuned on all the social medias you can imagine, and keep informed for more events like this if you enjoyed. Thank you so much, Birgit. I think we can all have a big round of applause for Birgit, for people that are there. There we go. And yeah, stay tuned. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. If you, Henry, if you allow me just to say thank you to everyone. Birgit, thank you so much. I know we got into this by surprise, but I really believe this is valuable for the whole community. So thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and allowing people to look into your personal feelings in life, but also just sharing your thoughts. It's always great to hear you. I think you guys really have to stay tuned. There's 3 seminars on this series. We're doing this partnership with UIB Minds and Society. So stay tuned. You can look for the seminars on the Society's website.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, everyone.